And once again, it is the Horror Guys.
I'm Kevin.
I'm Brian.
And we're here to talk about some horror movies, aren't we?
I'll bet we got 4 movies in a short.
Well, I bet we do.
What do we got?
We have The Crazies from 1973, not the remake, the original Crazies. And Trick or Treat from 2007. And So-Vam. Is it So-Vam?
It is. It is So-Vam.
So-Vam. How Vam is it? It is So-Vam. And then, of course, we got a short. And we have Halloween Kills from 2021, the latest that's available. There's another coming soon, I understand.
Man, I hope Jason dies in this one and Freddy gets him.
Oh, that happens in the...
That's when Gandalf and Captain Picard come in, right?
That happens in the Michael versus... No, that's not. That's not. See, they need to do a 3-way.
Candyman versus Sandman.
Yeah. Versus Chucky.
There you go.
Versus Michael.
Oh, Michael's in this one. Okay, all right. I forget sometimes.
Halloween, yeah. Well, they had Jason versus Freddy. They need to do a Michael versus Freddy.
Really, what would they do? They just stand there and punch each other. Neither one of them have... At least Freddy's got some superpowers to make it interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, what are we going to talk about first?
The 12th issue of the Horror Bulletin is now available.
Oh, okay.
Go to horrorguys.com/monthly and pick up the September issue of Horror Bulletin. 31 fantastic synopses and reviews.
With a very cool cover.
With a very cool skull cover on it. Mm-hmm. That's hard to say. Yeah, you can pick that up as an ebook, or you can pick it up in a print book. I like the print book because you can actually put it on your shelf and admire it all year long.
And show it off to everybody.
Look, this is my skull book. Okay, yeah, horrorguys.com to read all our reviews, horrorbulletin.com to sign up for our weekly newsletter, and horrorguys.com/monthly to pick up one of them books, because they're cool.
Yeah, they are.
All right, what would we got first?
We got The Crazies, 1973. Which was also known as Codename Trixie, which I think The Crazies is a way catchier, cooler title.
It kind of makes it sound like a comedy, though. I wonder if there was some confusion at any point.
Well,
they'd learn real fast.
When they saw it was directed by George A. Romero, I don't know. He wasn't, a household name probably at that time in 1973.
Well, this is quite a few years after Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Written by Paul McCullough and George A. Romero. Stars Lane Carroll, Will McMillan, and Harold Wayne Jones. Runtime is 1 hour and 43 minutes. There's a trailer in the show notes.
There is always a trailer in the show notes. And just to clarify, we did talk about the Crazies remake from 2010 a couple months ago.
Which we liked a lot.
We did like it, yes. Yeah. And it was essentially the same story, just sort of different point of view in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. And I think the remake made it better. I liked the remake better.
I think back in the 70s, it was all anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-war, and it's definitely a product of the times.
Yes.
And people don't care about that stuff quite so much anymore. Not in the same way.
They want the scares.
Zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, almost spoiler-free... Almost right away, we find out that it's a disease causing the problems, and it's being handled by the military. And this is in 5 minutes, so it's not really a big spoiler. It's still pretty horrifying and tense, but it's much more of a medical action thriller than horror. Well, that's debatable. The 2010 remake really played up the zombie side of things, and the movie took quite a while there to reveal that it was a military bioweapon that leaked. There's a lot of shouting and shooting in this one, so it's a very loud movie. But overall, we did both find it pretty gripping and entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Just turn down the volume a bit sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
So, what happens?
Well, a little girl gets a drink before bedtime. Her brother Billy is annoying. He starts acting like a zombie, just playing around. But then their father goes berserk and starts wrecking the place. Their mother is a bloody corpse, and then the father sets the house on fire.
Which is pretty much exactly what happens in the remake. Mm-hmm. It just happens off screen, and
this gets going a lot faster with that point. Yeah,
much more into the characters in the remake.
Well, the town fire alarm goes off, and David, a volunteer fireman, doesn't hurry to get out of bed. Judy gets a call from her boss, Dr. Brookmeyer, about the little kids being burned. At the fire station, one of the men says he saw a couple of truckloads of soldiers on the road.
That's unusual in these parts.
But
they don't have soldiers on the road here.
Right away, the military's moving in.
Yeah.
When Judy arrives at the hospital, there's a doctor there wearing a gas mask and a bunch of military there already, and they're taking over. Major Reuter says they're sealing off the town.
So here the military is pretty much on top of things. They were here before anybody even knew there was a problem.
Yep. The firemen, including David and his friend Clank, give up on the burning house. It's too far gone. The father is locked up in the back of the police car. He's freaking out about what he's done. Well, the doctor warns Judy that there's a super infectious disease on the site. He wants her to get away from people and to keep her coming baby safe. So Judy sneaks out the back door. The deputy tells the sheriff that the soldiers are setting up roadblocks and not letting anyone through. David and Clank go after Judy. A plane crashed that carried Trixie, an experimental vaccine that may be spreading.
Ah, the name. Code name Trixie.
Code name Trixie. Well, they call the president to order that a plane with an atomic bomb come over just in case they need to sterilize the area.
Nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Only way to be sure.
But these guys jump to that conclusion really early on.
They do.
They're ready ahead of time.
Just in case, yeah. Dr. Watts, one of the developers of Trixie, is forced onto the plane at gunpoint, leaving his equipment behind. You're going to come help us. Meanwhile, the soldiers clear out the high school, the motel, and everywhere else, and they start rounding everybody up. Colonel Peckham arrives, much to Major Ryder's relief. Peckham admits that Trixie was developed to be a biological weapon, not a vaccine. Yeah. There's a struggle, and the sheriff is shot. I shot the sheriff.
But he didn't shoot the deputy.
No. Some of the locals don't want to be rounded up and start shooting back. David, Clank, and Judy are captured by the soldiers and put into the back of a van. Well, one of the passengers is sick. They fight back and escape, picking up Kathy and her father along the way. So there's a little rag band of escapees here. Dr. Wells says that in 3 years of research, they were never able to find an antidote. It's going to spread through the entire town. You either die or go mad and die within 2 days. It's always lethal. He wants to send out blood samples so the guys back at the lab can study them, but there's no way to get helicopters in right now because they are a strict quarantine. Martial law. Colonel Peckham orders that resistors and the infected are to be put down. David and his crew are still hiding in the woods, and it looks like Kathy may be infected.
Or maybe she's just really weird. It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell because she's an odd duck. They find out about the plague and the cause, but Clank starts acting more and more crazy. And so does Kathy's father, who starts getting really frisky with his daughter. Well, Clank breaks that up, and a bit later the father hangs himself. David spots soldiers moving in on their position, and he and Judy run off, spreading the disease, doing their part to run away. Kathy goes out to greet the soldiers, having lost her mind. She's crazy, and they shoot her. Clank realizes he's got the bug, tries to hold back and fight the soldiers while David gets away. Clank actually does kill all the approaching soldiers, except for one who shoots him.
I want to be called Clank. That's a name. I want to be Clank.
Clank. It's a solid name.
Clank.
Clank, yep. Well, Dr. Wells has found a cure, and he prepares a sample to take to the lab outside. On his way to see Peckham, he's rounded up by the soldiers and put in with the infected. They don't even know he's a doctor.
Communications is definitely a problem with these people.
It sure is, yeah. Well, the soldiers are just doing their job, and there's a riot, and he's killed, and all his little test tubes full of antidote, and samples are all crushed. And okay, that's bad. That's very bad, yes. David and Judy make it to their perimeter. He builds a hiding place for her, and then goes off to find a hiding place for himself. Judy seems to have lost her mind. But has she got the disease, or is she just really upset? Not sure.
She is pregnant after all.
And they kind of play that up, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. David kills a soldier and steals his white suit, one of the coverall biosuit things. Some locals come out of nowhere and kill Judy. A bunch more soldiers arrive and capture him. Well, the government calls. There are signs of Trixie in Lexington. It got out. Colonel Peckham needs to relocate there now, as he's got experience. He goes through decontamination and then gets airlifted out by helicopter.
The end.
Yeah, kind of leaves you up in the air. Yeah.
Lift him up in the air.
Yeah.
He flew off by helicopter.
But I think the implication was it was the beginning of the end of the world.
Doomed.
Yeah.
Well, after the first 10 minutes, pretty much all the dialogue is shouted, screamed, yelled, or otherwise loud. It gets going right away, and it never lets up. This was from 1973, so it's obviously very dated, but everything unfolds in a realistic manner, and in many ways, this is the way something like this would probably actually play out. As we saw with COVID, the government may not be the best one to handle certain situations.
Well, this was a little worse than COVID.
Well, we watched the remake
worse.
of the Crazies from 2010 a few months ago, and that one's essentially a zombie apocalypse movie. This one is kind of the same basic story at the core, but it's much more from the point of view of the military. So what would they do if it happened?
Different. I think it made it less scary, less creepy.
Well, they had a lot less special effects, and it's old, so yeah.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I think if they remade this one as this one, it would probably be a lot more entertaining today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably would.
What else do we watch?
Trick or Treat from
Trick or Treat.
2007. This is a bit of a classic now. Wasn't hugely popular when it came out, I understand, but over time it's gained in popularity and cult status.
Cult following.
Uh-huh. Directed by Michael Daughtry and written and directed. Did I say that? Yes.
You did.
Michael Daughtry. Stars Anna Paquin, Brian Cox, Dylan Baker, Leslie Bibb.
And a whole bunch of other people.
And a whole bunch of other faces that you recognize, yeah. Runtime, 1 hour and 22 minutes. Trailer in the show notes.
What happens spoiler-free?
This is a clever anthology taking place in the same town on the same Halloween night, and we get to see things at different times and different points of view that all bring it together really nicely. Individually, the stories are okay, but the whole thing together is very good. It's creepy, got a good cast, and the special effects are really good. Overall, really well done and entertaining.
Yeah, most anthologies, you get like 4 or 5 individual stories that each one are done by different directors with different actors. And
maybe they'll have a loose wraparound.
Yeah, a radio announcer talking over them or something like that to sort of connect them together. But this one here, they actually entangle and intertwine with each other, and that's really cool.
Really cool, different points of view, and yeah, I really liked how they did that.
Okay, well, we begin with a PSA, public service announcement, discussing good advice for kids on Halloween.
And one of those things was never trick or treat. Only go to houses of people you know. Really? Well, that would be like 2 houses for most kids.
Well,
not canvassing the neighborhood.
This is 2007. I don't know when this was supposed to have taken place.
Well, it was an old black and white footage too.
Yeah.
It was an old informational video.
Back when you knew everybody in town.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Well, Emma and Henry are 2 drunk adults in costumes. She wants to clean up all the decorations before her mother comes by for a visit tomorrow. I mean, I know there are people that throw away the Christmas tree on the Christmas Day night.
But you're allowed to leave up the Halloween decorations overnight.
At least until morning.
Yeah.
Well, she notices a guy in a mask just standing there watching her. Something under a bedsheet kills her while Henry sits inside and watches porn, waiting for her to join him for a fun time. Sometime later, Henry notices that Emma never came inside and goes out looking for her, and he finds her. Credits roll.
First 2 victims.
Later that night, in Warren Valley, Ohio, there's a huge celebration.
No, this was earlier that night.
Earlier that night. Yes, we're going back in time.
It jumps back and forth in time.
I think it mostly jumps previouslys, because we see people that die earlier.
And not entirely.
But we bounce.
But they tie in with the celebration. There's the celebration downtown, and you see it on TV, and that's how you know, because the announcer talks about the celebration just starting. And
Lori and her friends are all dressed as fairy tale girls, and Lori is Red Riding Hood. She whines that she's still a virgin, because that comes up so often in conversation. Charlie grabs a handful of candy out of Stephen's pumpkin and gets caught in the act. Stephen talks about the dead roaming free this one night of the year. Stephen is a bit of a traditionalist. Always check your candy, he warns, as Charlie pukes out his entire innards. Charlie steals somebody's candy, goes sits with Stephen, and it's poisoned.
Yeah.
Well, too late for that. We see Stephen is the local school principal, and Stephen carries overweight Charlie to the backyard and puts him in the pre-dug grave. Between kids, dogs, and neighbors, it's really hard to dispose of a body in this town.
Yeah, there's a lot of dark humor in this.
As he goes back inside, one of the neighbors tries to get his attention, but he doesn't care. His son wants to carve a pumpkin right now, except it's not a pumpkin. A group of kids is out searching for jack-o'-lanterns for a charity project. Rhonda, the retard, comes out. That's not very nice.
That's not very nice. They used the R word right out loud in this movie.
Well, 2007. I mean, different.
That's only 15
It's not
years.
that long ago.
Only 15 years ago. But,
Well, anyway, Rhonda comes out of one of the houses, and she's said to be some kind of an idiot genius who joins them. You know, she really doesn't do anything. I mean, she's a little standoffish, introverted, but we don't see any genius or idiot here. She doesn't do that
seems
much.
pretty normal. Just a quiet gal.
Meanwhile, a vampire kills a woman at the big party downtown. The 5 pumpkin kids end up in a rock quarry. This is where the Halloween school bus massacre happened 30 years ago. Flashback time. 8 troubled, disturbed children were on this bus, but the driver took a different route that day. The kids' parents were sick of their crap and paid the bus driver to kill all of their children. We see that the kids were chained into their seats, and one of the kids commandeered the bus, but then drove it over the cliff instead. The driver was never heard from again, and neither were those kids.
Huh.
Where did the
Halloween
story
legend.
come from if they never found the bus?
Good question. Don't overthink that point.
Yeah. Back in town, Lori is looking for men, but can't find any single ones. She spots the vampire from earlier, and this is Anna Paquin. She's got a thing for vampires.
Mm-hmm, she does.
The pumpkin collectors plan to leave 8 pumpkins there as offerings to the kids who died. The group splits up, and Rhonda ends up alone. She encounters the school bus. She's chased by monsters until she loses her glasses and falls on a rock. Turns out, the monsters were just the rest of her friends playing a mean prank. Then the real dead kids show up, and Rhonda gets her revenge.
Well, just Halloween after all.
Throughout each of these stories so far, we get glimpses of a little kid with a cloth pumpkin mask. You've seen him. He's on the cover of the movie.
He's wandering around in all these stories.
Since he's a kid in the movie poster, it seems like we're probably going to see him again.
Uh-huh.
Lori, a.k.a. Little Red Riding Hood, is now walking through the woods and runs into the masked vampire again. What big eyes you have. Back at the party, someone throws a body wearing the Red Riding costume into the clearing. It's not Lori inside, it's the vampire.
Uh-huh.
Lori shows up and says she was playing hard to get. The vampire was wearing false teeth. The vampire turns out to be Steven from the segment before with the poison candy.
He's really messed up.
Yeah, he was just wearing a costume. Turns out Lori isn't that kind of virgin. She's just never killed before. All the women at this party turn out to be werewolves. The little pumpkin boy just sits and watches all the fun.
And they have the most painful-looking transformation in this, too. They peel
The
off...
werewolves that have to peel off their
peel
skin
off their
seem to have
human
it the
skin.
worst.
Yeah, that looks unpleasant.
And it's a mess to clean up the next day, I imagine.
Yeah, well, maybe they just eat the loose skin laying around.
Ew.
Yeah, ew.
Ew.
I don't know.
Well, a group of kids approach a creepy old house for some trick-or-treating. Inside is a grouchy old man who scares them away and takes their candy. There's one kid outside who comes back, and we see that his name is Mr. Krieg, Stephen's angry neighbor from before. When he goes out the front door, he sees dozens of pumpkins out there. His dog won't stop barking at the little doggy door. Eventually, Krieg sees someone upstairs inside the house. It's the little pumpkin kid we've seen roaming around the neighborhood. He goes up to his bedroom and finds more than he bargained for. The little boy pulls out a candy bar and peels it, revealing a box cutter blade inside.
Uh-oh.
The little boy attacks and the two fight. We get the scene from earlier as Krieg yells for neighbor Stephen to help and is ignored. See, all these little segments are overlapping.
Mm-hmm. Different points of view.
Krieg finally shoots the kid with his shotgun, and there's more pumpkin guts and slime around than blood. He calls 911, but the phone goes dead when the cord is yanked. The child's severed hand starts chasing him around the room. The hand reconnects, and the kid gets up. This is where Krieg really figures out that something isn't quite right with all this.
Like he just noticed.
Well, the kid takes the piece of candy Krieg was about to eat and just leaves Krieg alive on the floor. We see that Krieg is the former bus driver from that school bus segment.
Uh-huh.
Later, more trick-or-treaters come to the door, and Krieg gives them each a big handful of candy. We see more characters from previous segments interacting, and Krieg watches Rhonda cross the street after her ordeal. He watches the girl in the car heading to the party, and Emma and Henry arguing about taking the decorations down. The doorbell rings, and it's all the dead kids from the school bus coming to give Krieg a visit. Turns out he was the driver.
Took him long enough. It's a slow kind of revenge.
Was it 30 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
It's a slow story.
Slow revenge.
It's great the way the various stories overlap and eventually all tie together. None of the segments are especially noteworthy individually. I mean, you could see these in kind of any anthology. There's nothing that great here. But individually, they all fit together really well. There's lots of recognizable faces here in each segment, and none of the parts are bad. Overall, we both really liked it.
Yeah, big thumbs up.
Yeah. And then there was a short film.
Leica from 2022.
You know, Kevin's in his 50s.
Mm-hmm.
He's old. And he told me about a year ago that he had just learned that... You tell the story.
Well, I hadn't just learned, but I was well into adulthood. They told us the story of Leica, the heroic dog that went up into space, and he was a doggy hero and, you know, a pioneer for space exploration and technology.
True story. They shot Leica, the dog, into space
in
the 50s or the 60s or
Russian,
something.
Yeah, the Russian space program. They never told me in elementary school that Leica died. They had no intention of Leica coming back alive, in fact. And this just came as a shock to me well into adulthood.
The true story where the dog dies in the end.
40 years after I heard the uplifting story about Leica. What do you mean, Leica, she died? Like, what, she didn't come back and live a happy doggy life?
Probably still up there somewhere.
A doggy hero?
Well, anyway, this short film is called Leica, 2022, written and directed by Adam Fair, stars Anton Saunders, Royson Monahan, and Alexander Kaczmarek. 7.5 minutes, and there's a link in the show notes to watch it. So, Kevin, what happens?
Well, we are told that in 1957, Leica the dog was launched into Earth's orbit. She never returned. We watch the dog take off in the rocket as the title comes up. And in the present day, we watch the ISS explode in some kind of disaster. Commander Kotov gets out in his escape pod alone. After a tense spin, he gets the capsule under control. Ground crew wants to know what happened to the rest of the crew. His story? Well, it turns out he may not want to survive. And then stuff happens. Let's just say that Leica finally gets her revenge.
The special effects here for all the space stuff is really good. Have you noticed how in the last decade or so space movies have gotten so much better?
And yet, animals, it seems like, have gotten a little worse. We've commented on that. The bear in the new Predator movie. You know, animal, is it the fur that's a thing? But anyway, this is...
Watching the new Lord of the Rings series, Rings of Power.
Yes.
They get these wolves and wargs and things. I mean, you got these orcs that look incredibly scary and monstrous, and then they get these fake-looking cartoon dogs come in and attack people, and it looks like crap.
Yeah.
And it costs billions.
It seems like CGI animals have gotten worse in recent years.
You can have all the artificial scary monsters you want, but when you try to do a simple bear or a wolf, you can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference. But anyway. Yeah.
Well, anyway, the space stuff here is really good. The dog, not quite so great, but it's all perfectly good enough for this story.
Mm-hmm.
It took 65 years for justice to be served, but it all works out in the end.
Yes, it does.
Ow!
Yeah, poor Leica. I'm never going to forgive NASA for that.
Was it NASA or was it the Russians?
It was the Russians, but I saw somebody posting on social media. They're never going to forgive NASA for that. Well, bad news. NASA had nothing to do with it.
Which, something else NASA had nothing to do with is Halloween Kills from 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by David Gordon Green, written by John Carpenter, Deborah Hill, and Scott Teems, stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, and Andy Matichak. The same people who starred in the 2018 Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Trailer in the show notes, of course. Spoiler free, what happens?
Well, this continues directly after Halloween 2018. And that was the movie that disregarded all the other films in the series. It was a years later sequel to the first 1978 movie.
There was the one Halloween from 1978, Halloween 1, and then the next movie jumps all the way to 2018. They skipped 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and whatever came after that.
Yeah, and in actuality, if you remember back to original Halloween 1, 2 happened that same night.
Yeah.
In this timeline.
This replaces that.
That didn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. Well, what's worse than ignoring the second movie from 1981 and all the other movies in the series? Going back to edit and supplement the events in the 1978 original and its ending.
You thought you saw all of 1978 Halloween, but you didn't. There's more.
You think you know how it ends, and
retcon.
Shall I read my last sentence?
Go ahead.
This movie spreads its cheeks and takes a massive steaming dump on the whole Halloween timeline.
Kevin didn't like this movie.
I'm still angry about this movie. I'm angry. I very seldom am angry over the people that make a Halloween movie or any horror movie.
I thought it had problems, but I didn't hate it quite in the league that Kevin does.
Angry about it. Angry.
Well, a few minutes after the previous film, again, the 2018 version of Halloween, Allison's boyfriend Cameron finds Officer Hawkins on the street. Hawkins isn't quite dead yet. "He needs to die," whispers Hawkins, "and I'm the one who's going to get him." Well, we get a flashback to 1978 as Hawkins... There was no Hawkins in the first one, was there?
Oh, but there is now.
There is now.
You've been gaslit.
Okay, so we flash back to 1978 as Hawkins shoots at Michael Myers. The police warn all the kids that there's a murderer on the loose, including Lonnie, a wimpy-looking kid. Lonnie sees Michael and calls him the boogeyman. The two cops then go into the old Myers house to look around. Michael storms in and attacks one cop, but the other cop, Hawkins, shoots the first cop by mistake. Oops. Hawkins tells Loomis that Michael did it, and the police capture Michael outside, a sort of alternate ending to the first movie. Credits roll. Now, of course, if you watch the 1978 movie, Loomis shoots Michael and he falls out a window, apparently dead. The police show up, they all go downstairs, and Michael is gone. Because we know he's going to return in Halloween 2.
And Jamie says, do you believe in the boogeyman?
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
But now, this time, the cops captured him. He didn't die, and Loomis didn't shoot him, and he's fine. He just goes to the loony bin.
For 30, 40 years. And
alternate ending.
Yeah.
Back in 2018, there's an awful talent show at the local bar in Haddonfield, hosted by the adult Lonnie. A guy comes up on stage and tells the story of Haddonfield's most famous citizen. He's Tommy, the boy from the first movie. He points out several survivors of that fateful night. They all drink a toast to Laurie. And again, from this point, only thing that has happened historically is Halloween 1. None of these people know about what happened earlier that night.
Right.
So this guy's for killing like 5 people. Okay.
Yeah. That's
Meanwhile, Laurie is in the back of a truck with her family heading out of town after setting fire to her house with Michael in the basement. The firemen show up and do their thing. One of them falls through the floor into the basement where Michael kills him and steals his hat, which is enough to get the others to help him out. The firemen see who it is and attack him, but he kills all the firemen. And I take it there was some sort of uprising about this on the internet.
I remember the internet's being kind of outraged about good guy firemen getting killed like that.
There's lots of people that got killed by Michael innocently.
Yeah, but especially
firemen are kill-proof?
Well, no, but there was a higher level of outrage over that. I remember that being a thing.
Laurie is taken to the hospital. Karen and Allison are there as well. Karen breaks down, realizing that her husband didn't survive the previous film. Laurie goes into emergency surgery. Michael kills an old couple a few houses down from the fire. He fills up the old man with knives like pins in a pincushion, but takes the best knife with him. Before long, Tommy, Lonnie, and everyone in the bar learn about what happened on the TV news. One of the patrons finds someone in their back seat, and a bunch of the bar patrons go out to get Michael. Whoever was in the car drives off, but doesn't get very far. We see that it's not Michael, it's the other escaped lunatic who's still unaccounted for. Was there another lunatic mentioned in the previous film?
No, they were all accounted for except for Michael.
Yeah, I thought so. They missed this guy, I guess.
Yeah. He was hiding in the cushions or something.
Well, we change scenes, and we see that Big John and Little John live in the old Myers house now, and they tell the story of who used to live there to scare some kids. Hawkins gets wheeled into the hospital, and he needs surgery too. Karen brings the police up to date on her story, and they tell her that Michael is still alive. Cameron explains that the whole town is out looking for Michael, and Karen insists that Michael will be coming to the hospital for Lori, because it's all about her.
Mm-hmm.
Allison wraps up a big knife and lays it next to the unconscious Lori. I'm sure she could fight him off in her sleep. Tommy, Lonnie, Lindsay, and everyone else gets guns and goes Michael hunting. They start organizing, but Michael starts fighting back. Lori wakes up, but Allison has run off to join the fight. Hawkins is in the next bed right next to her, and they talk about old times. Lori tells him they killed Michael, and he doesn't know any better, because he was killed, shot. What happened to him? He got shot, stabbed? I don't remember now.
Stabbed, I believe.
Injured.
Yes, stabbed, yeah.
Tommy comes to the hospital, and he rabble-rouses dozens of families to hunt for Michael. "Evil dies tonight," they all shout, and they shout down the incompetent police who try to keep order. Tommy comes in and tells Lori the truth. Karen says to trust the system, but Lori isn't having that. Lori gives herself a shot of pain relief and says, "Bring it on." She's a badass.
Mm-hmm.
Cartoon style almost.
Almost, yeah.
A little over the top.
Yeah, but then she ends up not really doing much.
Outside, the second maniac shows up asking for help, and the others think that he's Michael. No one really knows what Michael looks like.
Right.
They chase the terrified lunatic all over the hospital, causing no end to the rioting mayhem. Karen tries to save the guy, but he ends up jumping out the window instead. Lori gets carried back to her room, and Hawkins tells more about what happened in 1978. Loomis was about to kill Michael, but Hawkins saved Michael's life, and he's got just a hair of regret about that.
Mm-hmm.
Hawkins explains that it was Dr. Sartain that took Michael to Lori's house. Michael doesn't care about her at all. It's about the house and going home.
Yeah, I believe it was Dr. Sartain that stabbed him.
Oh, yeah, backstabbing, right, yeah.
Yeah.
The traitor, the sneak.
That was the twist in the previous movie.
Yes, it was. And anyway, it's not about Lori anymore. It's about the house. They've changed his entire motivation.
Kinda.
He always wanted to kill his entire family, including the sister, the niece, the nephew, the daughter, and whoever else they thought of for the sequels. But no, it's about standing in front of a window.
This time he's going home.
The Big and Little Johns get a knock at the door. "Michael's home." Lonnie, Cameron, and Allison figure all this out on their own and head over there. They soon find 2 dead Johns. Lonnie and Cameron soon join them, but Allison puts up a fight. She can't win, but then Karen arrives and sticks a pitchfork through Michael. She steals his mask, but he gets up and comes after her anyway. She runs away, leading him away from Allison. Turns out, she was leading him to the organized mob of townspeople armed and ready. He's surrounded like 20 angry pitchfork and torch-wielding visitors.
Mm-hmm.
He picks up his mask and puts it back. They should have killed him before he put the mask on.
Yeah, yep, I think that gives him his power.
But he puts his mask back on, and they shoot him repeatedly and beat him with baseball bats even more repeatedly. Then they kick him even more repeatedly. And then Karen finally stabs him in the back of the neck, somewhat excessively. He's got to be dead. Right?
Right.
Well, back in the hospital, Lori says there's no way Michael could be human. The more he kills, the closer he gets to ascendance. You can't defeat it with brute force. If they don't kill him tonight, maybe we'll find him again next Halloween.
Maybe.
Michael then gets up and kills the entire crowd of armed people one at a time, including Tommy and Karen and about 70 other people, all of who are armed and with weapons.
But he mostly attacks them one at a time, and they attack him one at a time again. And
yeah,
it's kind of.
Well, Lori's in the
Don't like
hospital.
it.
Lori is in
Didn't
the
like it.
hospital room, and Michael is in the Myers house, and both of them stare out windows, pensively, waiting for another movie to wrap this all up.
Yeah.
Well, we mentioned that the previous film disregarded the second movie, and here they even retcon the end of the first film, showing Michael's capture instead of escape. Remember, as far as most of these people know, only 5 people were killed way back in 78. Only 5. How did Michael get to be so legendary for that when we have bigger murderers than Michael almost every day on the news in modern times? By cutting out all the umpteen deaths in the previous films, they've reduced Michael to a pretty minor serial killer in the big picture. Finally, the silver shamrock masks come into play.
Well, they make an appearance anyway.
Yeah, they're there, yes. You got to be watching for them. Not only those, but a lot of the former cast members of the 78 film appear here. Actually, most of the adults in the town were child actors in the first film. Remember all that babysitting? Those kids are back. For the most part, Laurie and Hawkins sit this one out. Took this movie off. They're going to lay in their hospital beds. But you can tell they're saving them for the big finish in Halloween Ends coming up next month sometime. Horror guy Kevin notes that this is a watchable movie, even has some entertainment value, but he has lost patience with the disrespect to the original two films.
Yes, he has.
He is annoyed.
I am annoyed with these, yes. I do like one fan theory, though, that Michael's actually an advanced Silver Shamrock robot. That's why he can't be killed. And he's lost and nameless now that the Silver Shamrock factory and his creator's been destroyed. That happened in the third movie. And, but he's still stuck out there, stuck on his original program.
They really need to do something to legitimize Halloween 3. They really do.
After he goes back to the house that he was programmed to recognize. And
I'd see that.
It's a theory.
Well, another 6 or 8 weeks and you'll know.
Yep.
Which takes us to our very last film this week, 2021's So Vam, which is available on Shudder. Directed by Alicia Mayo McKay, written by Alicia Mayo McKay, and I don't want to say her because I suspect that's not the case.
I think there's a lot of them. There's a lot of theming in this one.
Yes. Benjamin Paul Robinson stars Chris Asimos, Emma Bleby, and Jessica Burgess. Hour and 13 minutes. Trailer in the show notes. Spoiler free. This was an interesting take on the vampire mythos. It's the first horror movie the horror guys have seen with trigger warnings at the beginning before it starts. More than just the usual, you'll scare yourself to death with this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit hit and miss in a low-budget indie movie kind of way. It's kind of a high-budget, low-budget movie.
Yeah, it is.
It starts off looking really good and gets cheaper as it goes.
Yeah, I thought that was strange.
But overall, decently done and fairly entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
I hesitate to say it's a great movie. I hesitate to trash it too much.
I was entertained.
I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd give it a 7 at least.
Okay.
Yeah, I certainly liked it more than disliked it, and they did a good job with it. Yeah, interesting take on vampires.
All right. What happens?
Well, like we said, we start out with a trigger warning because there's going to be anti-LGBT,
many gay slurs,
and sexual violence, and
the main character is a
getting
gay
assaulted.
person. There's lots of trans people in here, and there is some bashing and slurring.
So the trigger warning comes up, and someone is a voiceover talking about Katharine Hepburn. Well, Kurt talks about the value of being a drag queen. Well, at least he wants to be one. He then gets gay bashed by a bunch of bullies, and it's a bloody mess, but 2 people walk up, and everything stops. We hear growling noises, and the bullies run away. Credits roll. Something chased the bullies away. Well, Kurt's in high school, and even the mean girls bully him. When he goes home, he watches horror films on TV with his friend Katie. He compares the angry mobs in Frankenstein films to the jerks at high school.
And the way he puts it, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
There is a parallel there.
Yeah. And I like how they throw in things from Frankenstein and Dracula and things about Bram Stoker and stuff. That's pretty cool how they work those in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a couple of drag queens at the drag show think they should give Kurt a chance on stage. And we get a fairly long drag dance number from one of the pros. Next morning, at the comic book shop, we get a short speech about how Dracula was really just a racist metaphor by Bram Stoker, who was a closeted homosexual.
And is that true?
It's thought that he was.
Okay, well, she goes into a lot of detail. It sounded like accurate to me, the way it's put.
Yeah. If you look at his history, you think, yeah, he probably was. Yeah, but he was never out, so we don't know.
He was 1800 and something. Of course, he wasn't.
Yeah. If you don't like something, make it a vampire. One customer adds, and we see that Kurt is not his father's favorite son.
He is not the football star.
Yeah. He pesters Katie at work, but she can't talk while she's there. And as he leaves, a man with glowing eyes and big teeth talks to him in the car. He doesn't want to go along, but he doesn't fight back much either.
He's almost hypnotic.
Yeah, a little bit of hypnotic power is there. And the guy suddenly grows fangs and bites Kurt. A couple of hunters storm in, set the guy on fire with holy water. Well, when Kurt wakes up, April and Harley, the hunters, explain that he was dying, but they brought him back. And they're vampires themselves, but they don't like Landon, the vampire that nearly killed Kurt. And, oh yeah, by the way, Kurt is a vampire now as well.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah. And it's broad daylight, but that's okay. Sunlight only bothers them a little bit.
They also mentioned that holy water doesn't hurt them. And yet we just saw them use it to burn up Landon.
It certainly worked good on Landon there.
Yeah.
I mean, it slowed him down. Didn't kill him. Spoiler.
Okay.
Spoiler coming up. He's not dead, but...
All right, he didn't kill him, so I guess it's not lethal.
Yeah. Well, they go to a Pray the Gay Away camp for dinner.
What do they call those things, really? They have a name.
Conversion
Therapy,
Conversion therapy, yeah. April tells him, we need blood, so we take it from those who don't deserve it. After he eats, the bodies melt, which is a mighty convenient way for the evidence to go away, isn't it?
What bodies?
Yeah. Well, Katie starts looking for Kurt, but no one has seen him lately. She misses him, and then gets angry when he turns up. They encounter the girls from school, and through the magic of camera tricks, he's able to beat them up this time. Yeah, it wasn't really much of a fight combat, but you get the point across. April puts Katie to sleep so she'll forget the fight. He was going to tell Katie about his new situation, but April says he can't do that. Later, Landon, who isn't really dead, comes upon the three unconscious girls and smiles.
Ooh, a buffet.
Yeah. Well, April takes Kurt to a vampire club, which is fairly sparsely attended. They all drink from a Nazi they murdered. Kurt meets Andy, who talks about actual vampire hunters that are out there. At school, the three bad girls all give Kurt nasty looks. Landon comes to Katie. Uh-oh. He asks her out after work. She doesn't know he's a vampire. Kurt sees her with him, but he's staked through the stomach by one of Landon's vampire girls. The mean girls, they're vampires now too. Andy rescues him, and he heals. Kurt's father reports him as a missing person. We get an angst montage as Katie wakes up and the other vamps are out looking for her.
Nothing more fun than an angst montage.
Angsty montage, yeah.
Yeah, and something to add here. Kurt was converted by the good vampires, and he's all right. He's a healthy vampire. The three bad girls were converted by Landon, and I guess he can't do it right or something because they smell like rotted meat and they're kind of decomposing.
Yeah.
They're not good. They're not healthy-looking vampires.
Yeah, they're not going to last. They're nasty. Plus, they're mean.
Yeah, mean girls.
Even meaner now, yeah. Well, Harley finds Katie, and she's fine. Landon didn't do anything to her. It's a message. Katie wakes up, and she knows all about vampires now. Well, Landon comes in, and he fights with April. Andy and Kurt fight with the three girls, and with help from Katie, they take care of them. And then the four heroes gang up on Landon and tear him apart. Then they all go home covered in blood. Happy ending.
Yay.
Yeah. Later on, and happier ending. Kurt finally gets to go on stage as drag queen. His father and Katie are in the audience watching, along with his vamp friends. So,
Okay, I got a question about Kurt there at the
happy
end.
ending. Mm-hmm.
He's up on stage doing his little dance as a
I
drag
wondered
queen.
about that too.
Where did those big boobs come from?
Yeah, because apparently a little bit of time has passed. Those weren't. I mean, there's a drag queen trick where you can scrunch your chest up.
Oh, not that much.
Oh, those were not. That was not that. Those were Hooters.
I guess since it's a stage show, they could be prosthetic.
That was my thought. Were they prosthetic for the stage? Because that's certainly a thing that you can do. Were they prosthetics, or did he have implants done? And how does a vampire have implants done when they would just heal and wouldn't the body reject them?
I don't think you could.
Yeah, it seems like
We should call a vampire and ask.
Yeah. Does that? Can you get implants as a vampire, or will your vampire body just spit them out? But they could have
Wake
been.
up in the morning and boink, boink. Are those eggs? No.
But the character could have just been wearing prosthetics.
I think
as
that's
part of the
probably
costume.
yeah,
I think that's most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the acting here is pretty mixed. Some of the actors are very good, and others are indie film can't quite act natural yet actors. Some of them just read their lines. Actually, the beginning of the film feels really well done, high budget, good production values, but as it goes along, it starts to seem cheaper and cheaper as it goes along, and I don't know why that would be. The story does carry it through. It is entertaining throughout, and it's pretty good. The idea of vampires as an allegory for gay people is far from new. It was pretty much the entire premise for the True Blood series and a handful of other well-known stories. This one is fairly short and moves quickly, and the story is good and fairly original. I did like it.
Yep, I did too.
It's not the best production value. It's kind of cheap. I'm going to say it's better than most indie films.
Yeah.
But it's certainly no studio thing.
It's kind of a tweener.
Yeah, it definitely is. All right, and those are our movies for the week. We
should watch some more next week.
We should, yeah. Halloween Kills we both thought was kind of awful.
Yeah.
So Vam we thought was pretty decent. Trick or Treat was great. Crazies was dated but entertaining.
Yeah, I think probably Crazies is my least favorite though of the week.
You like Halloween Kills better? Objectively, it's a better movie. It's just mythologically.
Objectively, it's a better movie. It's just I'm angry about it. Yeah. I'd put So Vam as my second favorite after Trick or Treat.
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, on the Horror Bulletin newsletter this week, we have a couple of bonus films. We watched, believe it or not, Metropolis from 1927.
That was a blast from the past.
It's long for a silent film.
It is. And
but it's good.
It's strangely entertaining.
And also Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1931. There was a silent film. This wasn't silent. This was
talky, and yeah.
It's got a really cool an Academy Award-winning transformation scene.
Yeah, and it was the first time a horror movie had won an Academy, and it actually won 3 things.
One of them was Best Actor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very cool. And of course, you can see that over at horrorbulletin.com. Sign up for the weekly mailing list and get all the future bonus films right there in your mailbox.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
See ya.
See ya.